we may have lost another 3 starting running backs to injuries. So this video right here may be one of the most important ones that you watch all season long as we try to find our starters for week 6 in fantasy football. Yo, Headliner Nation, hopefully everybody's doing well out there, and hopefully you avoided the injuries that have popped up here after week 5 of the season. So heading into week 6, we have got a lot of work that we need to do. Make sure you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and make sure that you have that volume turned all the way up, because we're going to dive into every matchup for running backs in week 6 of the NFL season. Thursday Night Football has the opportunity to really be the tale of two cities. When you take a look at the Denver Broncos, they can't stop anybody running the football. Could be a huge week for Isaiah Pacheco. When you take a look at the Kansas City defense, though, they're really good against the run. So with everything going on in the Denver backfield, who's really going to be the guy this week? Javonte Williams missed last week and is banged up right now. And even if he was 100% healthy, this still would not be a great matchup for him. Samaje Perine, he's basically lost the RB2 spot on this Denver team to Jaleel McLaughlin. He is now technically, really, if Javonte Williams misses, kind of the de facto starter at this point when you take a look at the workload that he got last week. Now, the only reason I have McLaughlin listed in yellow right now is because of his pass catching upside. Denver probably going to be down in this game, playing from behind. The hope is that McLaughlin can get us a few targets and a few receptions, maybe score a receiving touchdown. But honestly, with a couple of buys this week and the injuries that we've had at the running back position, we're scrambling to try and find a few guys that we could potentially flex or put in if you're dealing with a lot of issues right now. And for Isaiah Pacheco, absolutely love this matchup. There's no team in the NFL that's worse against the run than the Denver Broncos. Isaiah Pacheco is a top 10 play this week with top 5 upside. He's been the guy over the last couple of weeks. At the beginning of the year, it seemed like there was a little bit back and forth, a little bit of rotation, but it is Isaiah Pacheco right now. Make no doubt about it. He is getting a majority of the touches in this backfield, and this week against Denver, he's going to score a majority of the points. For Baltimore and Tennessee, this is a really interesting matchup because Tennessee's run defense has been really good this year until they got mossed last week by Indianapolis. The fact that I just used Zach Moss's name as a verb is literally the low point of my life right now. But unfortunately, I just don't see the same upside for Gus Edwards and Justice Hill this week. Now, Gus Edwards to me is really kind of like an emergency RB3. The guy is probably going to get you like 5 or 6 points because he's going to run for 50 or 60 yards. But if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's not going to give you a great opportunity to win. But that's why I'm going to list Justice Hill in yellow, because if he gets an opportunity to work in the passing game a little bit more, which he does over Gus Edwards right now, and if he gets that touchdown because he's still used within the red zone a little bit more, he's going to have a little bit more upside. So if you're looking for an emergency option to give you more upside this week, it would be Justice Hill. If you're looking for a guy to just get you like 5 or 6 points because the rest of your team is stacked, Gus Edwards, you could toss in there as a flex option, but nothing more. Let's talk about Tennessee for just a second, because on the waiver wire video this week, I didn't bring up Tyjae Spears, and I saw a few comments wondering why in the world I wouldn't do that. Well, the numbers on the screen are exactly why. I have no interest in picking up Tyjae Spears right now, unless you're a Derrick Henry owner and you're just wanting to handcuff him. Spears isn't even averaging 7 fantasy points per game right now, and last week was the first week that he found himself inside the top 24, and that was because he scored a touchdown. Spears is not a fantasy starter on his own. That's why I'm not interested in picking him up right now. I'm looking for guys that I could potentially start that have standalone fantasy upside. Now, the biggest thing about Spears is if they get a negative game script, they are using him a little bit more often, but it isn't because they don't trust Derrick Henry. It isn't because they like Spears more. It's because in those situations, Spears is a little bit better adapted as a pass catcher. And why wouldn't you limit some of the workload that Derrick Henry is getting earlier in the season? So then when you make a run at the playoffs later on, you've got Derrick Henry fully healthy. I actually think this is a really smart move, by the Tennessee Titans. But unfortunately, if you're just looking at box scores or fantasy points from a fantasy perspective, it worries you. But don't let it worry you. Derrick Henry, we're going to keep him. Now, this matchup is a little bit more difficult. Obviously, Baltimore pretty good against the run. They have a really good defense, and this is absolutely a game that could go into that negative game script again, that you would see Tyjae Spears come out and maybe play a little bit more often than we would like. But once again, all season long, Spears has been an RB24 one time. Derrick Henry is still the guy. He's still seeing more touches. He's still getting more yards. He's scoring more touchdowns. He's getting more fantasy points even on his worst days. So we're not moving away from Derrick Henry. Does he have the upside that we would like this week? Absolutely not. Are we still putting him inside our top 12? Yes, because he's a guy that's still getting the type of volume. Tyjae Spears is only a PPR type of guy if you really need an emergency option this week. But if he doesn't score a touchdown, which he's only done one time this year, he's not going to score you very many points. I'm looking towards a guy like Justice Hill, who I already talked about, instead of Spears. Washington had a great matchup on the ground last week against Chicago. But unfortunately, because their defense couldn't stop the Chicago Bears, they got put into a negative game script right away, and they just weren't able to control the game with the run. And now Washington is going to get one of the best run defenses in all of football with the Atlanta Falcons. Unfortunately, this could be back-to-back down performances for Brian Robinson, and that's not great for those of you relying on him. But keep your heads up. There's better weeks ahead. Just know that this week going up against Atlanta could be really tough. Atlanta's about middle of the road when it comes to defending running back, so the yards are absolutely going to be an opportunity for Brian Robinson. However, Atlanta has kept running backs out of the end zone for the most part. They allow the fewest fantasy points to running backs right now. So Brian Robinson, to me, is definitely going to be yellow because the upside might not be there this week, given a defense that really is keeping running backs out of the end zone. But just keep in mind, the yards could still potentially be there. If Brian Robinson runs for 70 to 80 yards and maybe adds a catch or two, he's still going to be looking right around 10 fantasy points. We're not sitting him or anything like that. Are we worried about his upside? Absolutely, but he's still one of the best running backs in fantasy football right now. 2 of the last 3 games for Bijan Robinson have been pretty disappointing. Hasn't really seen that upside that we saw in the other 3 games this season. This matchup against Washington, though, could allow him to get back on track. Washington is really middle of the pack when it comes to defending the run, and they'd give up a few points to the position as well. But Bijan Robinson continues to be in green, even with a couple of poor performances lately, because of the amount of volume that he is getting. The dude is just being utilized way too much in the passing game for us to say, hey, we're even considering putting him in yellow. The volume is absolutely there for him. And like we always say, volume isn't king. It's just part of the equation. But with Bijan Robinson, given the state of the running back rooms right now across the league, with that much volume, you absolutely start him and you rank him high every week. Here's an interesting fact for you. Alexander Mattison has the same amount of top 24 finishes this year as Bijan Robinson. Now, to put that into context, he hasn't finished nearly as high as Bijan Robinson this year either. He's been really towards the low end of the top 24, and that probably is very disappointing for some of you, depending on where you drafted him at. He hasn't given you the upside that you have wanted, but quite honestly, he's also given you the type of floor that hasn't lost you any weeks either. Now, this matchup going up against Chicago should be a good one for him, but it's the same reason we went high with Brian Robinson last week, and look what that Chicago offense did. If Chicago can get out in front of the Minnesota Vikings again, that could really cause some problems for Alexander Mattison's upside, and that is why he is listed in yellow this week. He's still going to be a start for me, but if the Minnesota Vikings can't stop Chicago, that's going to be a lot of issues for them, especially considering there will be no Justin Jefferson for the next few weeks. This is going to be a really tough matchup for Alexander Mattison to stay on track with, but we're still going to start him, and hopefully he just lands inside that top 24 again. Given the defense that he's running against, if we could get him a couple of big plays, that would be great. If we can't, then we might be in trouble. It could end up being D'Onta Foreman week for the Chicago Bears. Now, Roschon Johnson still currently in the concussion protocol as of this episode. If that changes, we will update it in the rankings. We know Khalil Herbert's going to miss a few weeks probably, and because of those two things right there, D'Onta Foreman could be the lead back and really kind of the sole back this week to get a majority of the touches. Now, Minnesota's defense is much better against the run than it is against the pass, so it definitely could be a really good week for DJ Moore and Justin Fields again. But if they can get out to a really nice size lead, if they can put up 14 points on this Minnesota Vikings team, D'Onta Foreman should see a lion's share of the workload and be a guy that we could easily stick in our flex this week and get away with it. Cincinnati is currently ranked 30th against the run in the NFL, and they are going to be facing Kenneth Walker coming out of the bye fully healthy. This could absolutely be Kenneth Walker week. He's done everything that you want from a fantasy perspective. He's averaging 18 touches a game, so he's got the value. He's averaging 88 total yards per game, so he's got the fantasy production as well. He's scored 5 touchdowns this year. He's really doing everything. Top 24 back, 3 of his 4 games this season, and he's averaging just over 17 fantasy points. This is really probably one of your best bets this week, Kenneth Walker against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, the Bengals offense looked a lot better last week. If Seattle can at least kind of bring him back down to earth and limit Ja'Marr Chase, then that could mean that maybe they don't blow up the way that they did last week. And if that happens, it's great for Seattle and Kenneth Walker. Keep it closer, keep it in positive game script. Now, if they can't start Ja'Marr Chase, that is where Seattle could potentially get pushed to negative game script, and then that's where Kenneth Walker starts to lose some of his ceiling. But like I just said, with all the numbers that he's had this year, he's still one of the safest starts that you can grab at the position. The Seattle Seahawks have allowed the 6th fewest rushing yards to opposing running backs this season. And Joe Mixon is a guy that hasn't reached his upside yet this year. One of the biggest reasons why is just because the offense hasn't been great, and he's had some tougher matchups on the ground. But the one thing he's done is he's gotten inside the top 24. He's averaging just over 10 fantasy points per game. And quite honestly, for where you were drafting Joe Mixon this season, you can't be disappointed in that because he's not underperforming for where he was drafted. Now, in previous years, when you would spend maybe like a late first, early second round pick or something like that on him, yeah, of course, this would be disappointing, but he became a huge bargain this offseason. And because of that, you're getting a guy that's getting touches on the ground and he's getting you points. So if you're utilizing him in your flex or your RB2 slot, he's doing exactly what you drafted him to do. This week is not going to get any easier. Those 10 fantasy points really is probably his ceiling this week, but if he can somehow find the end zone, that should just put him right over that. Christian McCaffrey had a pretty decent game last week against Dallas. Not a ton of yards on the ground, but he scored again. And now he's going to get a really tough matchup going up against the Cleveland Browns, the #1 defense in all of football, who are also coming off of a bye. So really, Christian McCaffrey's ceiling this week is 100% predicated on him scoring a touchdown. This is going to be the biggest test that the San Francisco 49ers have seen this season on the opposite side of the ball for them. Christian McCaffrey, though, it doesn't matter. He's still a top 3 running back. If you own him, yeah, you're probably a little bit concerned that maybe he doesn't outright win you the week like he has a lot of other times this season, but you're still starting him, and with as good as they've been moving the football, he's still a really big candidate to score a touchdown. As far as the Cleveland running backs go, we're not starting any of them. I'm not going with Jerome Ford. I'm not going with Kareem Hunt, and I didn't even bother to put Pierre Strong Jr. on the list this week because the matchup is way too tough and he just hasn't seen enough yet. Jerome Ford, there's going to be a lot of questions about him this week. I absolutely can already tell you right now, the live stream this week will be flooded with, do I start Jerome Ford? As of right now, no, but you also might not have a choice. It really depends on who you have on your team. As a blanket statement, though, I don't want to play him this week. It's a tough matchup. He's been super inefficient over the last few weeks since his bigger game after Nick Chubb went out, and he really hasn't done anything outside of score a couple of touchdowns. Jerome Ford is not some fantasy stud that everyone wishes that he was right now. Kareem Hunt probably sees some more touches this week. Pierre Strong probably see some more touches this week. Me personally, given the matchup and what we could see from 3 players in the backfield, I'm staying away from all 3 of them. Alvin Kamara has looked really good since returning from suspension, and for those of you that used a later round draft pick on him, you've absolutely had him locked in the last couple of weeks, and he's helped you win on both occasions. Now this week, going up against Houston, going to be a really good matchup for him once again. Definitely top 12 upside for me, and if he sees a ton of work in the passing game once again, this guy has got top 5 potential this week against Houston. Unfortunately though, Dameon Pierce has absolutely no upside this week, and quite honestly, I want to stay away from even trying to start him. But once again, if you're dealing with injuries or buys, you might not have any choice. And if you're forced into that situation, hopefully you have a couple of guys in front of Dameon Pierce that can really offer you a lot more upside. Now with Pierce, I'm not ready to be off of him as of yet. He hasn't been great this season, but his offensive line is finally healthy. Give it a couple of more weeks, and with the way CJ Stroud is playing, we could definitely see a breakout in the second half for Dameon Pierce, and then he could end up being a guy that helps you win a fantasy championship. Indianapolis and Jacksonville is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Gentlemen, it's almost time for No Shave November, and if you want to get a head start on it like I did, head on over to manscaped.com and check out all of their brand new awesome beard products. I've been using these things for a week, and they are absolutely great. If you use code word headliners at checkout, you're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. Now, as far as this matchup goes, the reason that it is my must-watch matchup this week is because there's a lot of things that I'm keeping an eye on this. Number one, for Indianapolis, how is this backfield going to look? Jacksonville continues to be one of the most underrated rushing defenses in all of football. Back in week 1, they absolutely shut down Deion Jackson and this Indianapolis Colts rushing attack. And since then, they have looked just as good against other opponents, tougher opponents as well. Now, they're going to be getting Zach Moss, who's running very well right now, and potentially a little bit more workload from Jonathan Taylor. And there's a lot of people really confused on what to do with these 2 running backs right now. For Zach Moss, for me, if you own him, he's a sell high candidate coming off of last week. I'm sorry, but you don't pay Jonathan Taylor the most guaranteed money since Nick Chubb and not utilize him. Now, he's not being utilized right now because they're slowly going to work him back into the game plan. But you can almost bank on over the next 2 to 3 weeks, seeing Jonathan Taylor increase every single week and then taking back over this backfield, regardless of how good Zach Moss is doing. They might rotate a little bit more, which is going to make it even more tough. But if Zach Moss is not getting the volume, he might not be fantasy startable. Now, the good news here, well, I don't want to say good news because Anthony Richardson being hurt is not good news. But if you're trying to utilize either of these backs for fantasy purposes, having no Anthony Richardson taking away some of those touches does help increase their ceiling. But this is a really tough matchup this week. And quite honestly, yeah, you could start either Jonathan Taylor or Zach Moss. I would start Zach Moss still over Jonathan Taylor, but this is going to be a really tough week with a very, very low ceiling. Travis Etienne is coming off his best performance of the season. A huge performance in London going up against the Buffalo Bills. Now, this defense that he's going up against, he also played pretty well against in week 1. Now, if you remember back in week 1, though, Travis Etienne had a pretty big touchdown run towards the end of the game, and that's really what made his fantasy day. Indianapolis does a pretty decent job of clogging up those gaps on the offensive line and not allowing running backs to get those gaps and holes, but they can bounce outside and find some big plays on the Colts from time to time. So because of that, Travis Etienne will be inside my top 12, but he's a little bit more big play dependent this week than what we would hope for. So for Travis Etienne owners, absolutely start him and keep your fingers crossed that he gets that big run for a touchdown. But there is one thing that we know for certain. I took Tank Bigsby completely off the slide this week. Travis Etienne has a firm lock as the starter and workhorse in this offense, and Tank Bigsby has done absolutely nothing to even come close to touching his job. Some devastating news for fantasy owners this morning who were relying on Devon Achane to take them to the promised land this season. Huge performances to start his rookie year, but now he's dealing with a knee injury that could possibly hold him out for multiple weeks. Even though he's not being put on the IR right now, we don't know how much time he's going to be missing. But no Devon Achane makes Raheem Mostert a must start once again. And now he's going to be going up against a Carolina defense that's currently ranked 26th in the league against the run and allows the second most fantasy points to the running back position. Mostert is absolutely going to be in our lineups this week. He has high upside once again. And as always, we'll have a really nice ceiling and floor because, hey, if Miami goes up big on Carolina, which they absolutely could, Mostert could explode in the second half. Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard are going to be really, really tough to figure out because when you take a look at the dynamic of this backfield right now, Chuba Hubbard is getting a decent amount of looks. Like he's being used in the passing game. He's being used to pass block a little bit more. And because Carolina just is not able to put themselves in a winning situation, it just hasn't given Miles Sanders an opportunity to operate with a positive game script. Both of these guys could have some potential this week. I'm a little bit more interested in Chuba Hubbard than Miles Sanders. Now, the Miami defense hasn't been super great against the run this year. So if Miles Sanders could find a big play or two, that would be a great help. But considering the fact that Carolina will probably be playing from behind a majority of the day, then you would need to take a look at Chuba Hubbard being the PPR guy that's going to be on the field more often. Quite honestly, this is a backfield that I really want to try and stay away from. I don't want to start either of these guys this week because the dynamic back there is just really weird right now. But if I had to put my money on one guy, it would probably be Chuba Hubbard. Listen, I know you all are super frustrated with Rhamondre Stevenson. I hate to see it as well. Definitely one of my biggest misses so far from the offseason. I loved Rhamondre Stevenson and what he did last year, and I definitely thought it was going to carry over to this season, but there's been two big issues. If you remember, you saw my film breakdown that I did last week on Rhamondre Stevenson, and I told everybody at that time, their matchup against New Orleans in Week 5 was not going to be a fun one, but Week 6 against Las Vegas is where we were going to hope that he bounces back. Now, the two big issues is number one, the offensive line just can't block to save their lives right now. It's absolutely terrible. And number two, he's not being utilized in the passing game this year the way he was last season. But this is the bounce back performance right here. If Rhamondre Stevenson goes off, it helps push us in the right direction on what he could do the rest of the season. But if he doesn't, that's going to be a big concern. And quite honestly, Rhamondre Stevenson is probably not a guy that we can hope for any longer. 23rd against the run. And A.J. Dillon, who has done nothing all season long, was able to look decent against them on Monday Night Football this past week. So we'll have to wait and see what Rhamondre Stevenson can do. Ezekiel Elliott saw a little bit more of an increased workload last week, and I don't think it has anything to do with them trusting Zeke over Rhamondre Stevenson. It's just one of those things where, hey, if you're down by a lot, what's the point on continuing to give Stevenson touches if you still think that he's your starting running back? Which, based on the way that they've utilized him this year, he is still the starting running back. But let's hope that this is the week where Rhamondre Stevenson can finally snap off a few big runs and can put together a season that puts him inside the top 12. If you've been playing Rhamondre Stevenson hoping that something would happen, now is not the time to give up on him. If you want to give up on him if he has another poor performance this week, feel more than welcome to. I'll back you up on that. But you're starting him this week because the opportunity is way too good. New England's been much better against the pass this season than they have the run. And Josh Jacobs still doesn't have a ton of upside on the ground. He's not running for the same amount of yards per carry that he did last season. Those big plays just are not there. But he's utilized so heavily in the passing game right now, he's still one of the safest starters in all of football because of the amount of volume that he's getting. I mean, the dude is averaging 21 touches per game. That's absolutely insanity at the running back position right now, and one of the highest numbers in the league. Continue to monitor what Josh Jacobs is doing, and if he's a guy that you can still buy low on, I would absolutely do it. Not a bad game against Green Bay. We would have hoped it has been a lot better, and this might be another tough one against New England, but I'm still willing to roll him out there because at this point, nobody's getting more touches than he is. Let's head on down to Tampa Bay, and David Montgomery has looked fantastic over the last couple of games. Now, this matchup against the Bucs is going to be a lot tougher. Hopefully Detroit's defense can slow down Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rachaad White, everybody in Tampa, and really slow down that passing attack so then they can run the football and control the game. Now, again, the defense for Tampa Bay has not looked bad. So this might not be the high upside gameplay that we've seen from David Montgomery over the last couple of weeks. But a lot of that upside is going to depend on whether Jahmyr Gibbs plays this week or not. Now, as of right now, we don't know, and that's why I'm going to list list Jahmyr Gibbs in yellow because I have no idea if he's even playing yet. But David Montgomery, again, because of the way he's being utilized on the ground and his heavy amount of rushing attacks, I'm still going to put him in green because nobody is seeing more volume on the ground right now than David Montgomery. Rachaad White is absolutely going to be in red. That's fine that they're coming out of the bye, and maybe that does lead to some potential upside this week, but the floor is so low for Rachaad White, I've got to put him in red. Going up against this Detroit defense, they've been very good against the run. Now, Carolina got him a little bit last week, but they were also very banged up last week. So we'll have to keep an eye on what players who have been out recently will be able to make their way back. Brian Branch will be the biggest one, though. He is such an elite defender in the middle of that defense and is having a great rookie campaign. We'll see if that defense can get a little bit more healthy. If they can, this is going to be a really low ceiling matchup with a really low floor for Rachaad White. If they're going to be missing more guys on the defense again, he still has a really low floor, but it's definitely going to help out his ceiling as well. James Conner was well on his way to another big game this past Sunday before going down with a knee injury. And as of this morning, it does sound like now he is going to be missing multiple weeks and could even go on the IR. I don't know what to expect from this backfield as of right now. This is something that we need to monitor over the next couple of days, and I'll update you all in the rankings episode on Thursday. But I honestly, going up against the Rams, I don't know if I want to invest in anybody from the Arizona backfield right now. It's something where maybe we see how it breaks out this next week against the Rams, and then we take a look at the following weeks. But this is going to be a really tough situation and just another tough injury that people are dealing with at the running back position. However, one of the best waiver wire pickups from the entire season, Kyren Williams is going to be in another fabulous spot to have a big week for fantasy owners. Arizona has a tough time stopping the run, and Kyren Williams is getting a ton of volume as well. 18 touches a game, over 16 fantasy points per game, and now he's going up against an Arizona team that is ranked 22nd in the NFL against the run and allows the 5th most fantasy points to the running back position. Kyren Williams will definitely be inside my top 10 this week. And with that being said, his current line over on Underdog is set at 56.5 rushing yards. I am absolutely going to go higher on that pick'em. And if you want to play that pick'em or any others that we talk about throughout the week, make sure you head on over to Underdog and sign up using code word headliners. Underdog is going to match your deposit up to $100, and you're going to get a special, almost guaranteed hit pick'em to play this week by using that code word. So if you play that special pick'em and the higher on Kyren Williams, we definitely could be putting some money in our pockets this week. DeAndre Swift has fallen back to earth over the last couple of weeks. Nothing crazy, nothing that's hurt us, but not the same upside that we saw the previous 2 weeks before that. So for DeAndre Swift, going up against a New York Jets team that's currently ranked 28th against the run, definitely a good chance to see that upside again this week. Now, also keep in mind, too, that this Philadelphia defense, if they can shut down the New York Jets offense and put themselves in some positive game script, DeAndre Swift could absolutely reach that top 5 ceiling that we've seen a couple of times already this season. He's definitely going to be in the green for me. Breece Hall is coming off of a huge week last week. I had him ranked higher than any other analyst in the industry. I had him all the way up at RB4 last week. But I also knew coming into this matchup that ranking was going to fall quite a bit because he's going up against the defense that is ranked number 1 against the run right now and allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points to the position. Breece Hall, absolutely the starter. Breece Hall, absolutely seeing an increase in his workload. Breece Hall absolutely has a lower ceiling this week because this matchup absolutely sucks. We'll see if Saquon Barkley can get back on the field for the New York Giants this week. They sorely need him. And he was looking like he was a little bit closer to playing last week. And then kind of at the last second, it was like, nope, never mind. He's not going to be able to go. So for Saquon Barkley, he really needs to get back on the field, not just for his team, but for fantasy owners. But honestly, we don't want him to push it either because we want him to be healthy for the stretch run. We'll continue to monitor that. But if he does play for some reason this week, I will absolutely put him in my lineup going up against a Buffalo Bills defense that got shredded by Travis Etienne last week and is coming off of that game where they're headed back from London. Maybe that jet lags them a little bit. Maybe they have a little bit of trouble adjusting before the game, but Saquon Barkley could be in a decent position this week if he is able to play. The New York Giants defense currently ranked 29th in the NFL against the run and allows the 6th most fantasy points to the position. Now, If the Buffalo Bills can get themselves back together and playing well against a New York Giants team that it's hard not to play well against, James Cook absolutely will get back to the ceiling that we've seen prior to last week. Last week against Jacksonville was not good, but I tried to warn all of you that Jacksonville's rush defense is really that good right now. A bad week, but we had him ranked towards the low end of RB2 status, and he didn't even really end up hitting that. But even with that being said, when we take a look at this matchup for James Cook, absolutely an opportunity for him to get back on track this week and to have a really, really nice upside, and I will have him ranked accordingly. Monday Night Football is going to be a great opportunity for Tony Pollard to get back on track. That Dallas defense is definitely going to need to step it up again this week. And last week against San Francisco wasn't really their fault. When you have 3 straight turnovers, it absolutely tires out the defense, and they're not able to go out there, get that rest, and then perform at a high level on every single snap. But things are not going to get easier against this high-powered LA Chargers offense. So if Dallas can at least keep it close and not have those turnovers on offense, Tony Pollard is going to have a pretty decent game if we can get him the volume that he needs. I'm going to put him in green because, again, there's not really a whole lot of running backs that have the upside that he does on a weekly basis. But this is all going to be about game script and how well this offense can keep the ball in their hands and not give it away to the Chargers. Now, for the Dallas defense, I mean, they are pretty good against the pass, and they've struggled a little bit against the run. Nothing crazy. They're kind of right in the middle of the pack right now going up against the run, but if Austin Ekeler can finally make his way back this week, it doesn't matter what you think of his status. You're playing him. You do not sit Austin Ekeler. Now he's had a bye. Hopefully he's healthy heading into this week against Dallas, and even if he doesn't pick up the yards that we need on the ground, hopefully he helps a little bit more through the air, knowing that there's no Mike Williams to take away some more targets from him, and that gives him a little bit higher upside. He's going to be in yellow because I still don't know if he's going to play yet this week, and even if he does, it could be a little tougher on the ground, and we might see a little bit limited upside there. But his work in the passing game still makes him fantasy relevant, even in this tougher matchup, even coming off the injury. There you have it, Headliner Nation, my start and sit analysis for every matchup at the running back position. Hopefully this helps you all get your lineup set for week 6 of the NFL season and brings you all to victory this week. Hit the like button for me, subscribe if you're new here, and leave me a comment down below. What are one of the matchups that you see this week that you are most interested in watching when it comes to the running back position? For now though, I'm going to get out of here. Peace out, Headliner Nation. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.